Sweet. First of all, thank you for Brian inviting me to obviously speak again. I think over the last few years at IWMW, I've spoken a variety of different things, from agile through to structured content. And in some respects, this presentation brings together all those things. I want to say that I stand on the shoulders of giants, and what I mean by that is that the team I work with, the people who are at Bath right now, and the people who have left Bath. So just to provide some context before we begin, over really the last 9 months, the team's been through a tremendous amount of change. There's been a lot of developers who've left, and that's hit us hard, both kind of because they're friends and colleagues, but also from a digital development perspective. So we now have a new team on board, and I think this is the right time to kind of talk about where we're at and what we're doing. So just to give you a bit of background, obviously Bath set out 3 years ago to build its own CMS, which at the time felt an interesting journey for us to take. I'm just going to kind of lift the curtain behind some of the stuff we've been doing. I'm actually going to show you the content management system, or publisher as we call it, for the first time, and talk about some of the more rationale. So it's less of a technical talk, it's more about kind of explanation of what kind of drives the vision of where we're at. So I think all the drivers are quite familiar to you all. This increasing competition in higher education. For Bath, we have an aging content management systems. I think we currently have 3 different systems. So we've got some Dreamweaver sites, we've got an open CMS sites, and now we have sites in our new publishing tool. So all of our major sites now are across into the publisher. The things really that drive me, from my perspective, that I'm particularly interested in, which the publisher does, is there is an ever increasing demand for content from our users in a variety of different platforms. There's been a proliferation of digital devices and platforms, and the challenge for universities and all organisations is there's a finite amount of resource. So in some respects, the teams can grow and shrink when we have projects, but actually there's only going to be so many people to be able to kind of create content. And that's kind of what drives the vision behind the publisher. It's about authors and making sure that we can help them do the job that they need to do. So, building a better publishing platform. So what's always struck me as slightly unusual is how people consume content has changed quite remarkably over the last 10 years with the advent of the iPhone. We've got Facebook, Twitter. It's been we publish out to a variety of different platforms. However, the way we plan, create, and deliver content hasn't. And I think that's something to do with the fact that the way we see our content management systems, they just kind of like manage content, but they don't really actually deal with the fact that it's about a creation process, which is often done by creative people. But there's also an element of how do we get it to the right place? And actually, there's a lot of duplication that goes on in our jobs as content creators. I was previously head of content. We spend an inordinate amount of time just creating content in a content management system, then pasting it somewhere else, then pasting it somewhere else, and these sources of truth grow rapidly. And Cardiff's a good example in terms of multiple sources of truth about courses, and that's the same problems that we have at Bath. So if we think about it, we have smart TVs, we have computers, smartphones, smart speakers now, and smart watches. And what really worries me is not actually really the... what really worries me is not computers and smartphones. What really worries me as the head of digital, so my role is to scan the horizon, is actually smart speakers, voice assistants. And we run the risk, if we don't look beyond what we're currently doing, of creating obsolescent platforms. Because if everybody remembers a few years ago about mobile responsive websites, everybody kind of rushed to do it, and we built responsive websites, but the content still got trapped in buckets, web pages. So the next thing is, I have my Google Assistant at home, and I enjoy speaking to my Google Assistant and asking it questions. And I'm worried about what Bath is going to do in the next 5 and 10 years. How is it going to address that when actually sometimes people won't be accessing our information via a visual display? There won't be a navigation. So I don't want to be doing transition every 5 years to put it into a new content management system. I do want to build a platform for the future. So in some respects, publishing platforms should help organizations scale content planning, creation, and delivery. They should aid the organization. They should help it move forward and help it to meet the future challenges it's going to face. But that requires some careful thinking. It requires making some mistakes along the way, and we've made mistakes. When I spoke last year, I talked about some of the mistakes we made. But as long as we have a clear vision of where we want to be, then it begins us to point us in the right direction. So, the publisher. I've called it, actually we have two tools. We have the content publisher and the course publisher. Often it causes slight confusion because we forget to say the right name and everybody looks at us and corrects us rapidly. So I'm just going to flip out of here and just go into the publishing tool. I've got to get used to the screens. Right, okay, so get a bit bigger for you. Okay, cool. So this is actually the publisher. This is the content publisher. This runs basically our top-level websites and our department websites. So the way that the publisher works is quite simple. I'll go to here first. Hold on. Okay, go back there actually. So basically we have content types. So we don't have the concept of modules where you can build your own pages. And the philosophy behind that's quite simple. We want people to concentrate on writing content, creating compelling content. What we don't want them to do all the time is design web pages. Why don't we want them to design web pages? Well, the problem with Bath was there were lots of websites, lots of different implementations, lots of different design patterns. But we were forcing everybody, every time they went to a different website, to relearn how to use our website, which is a barrier. It's a barrier from a perspective that helps students find their courses successfully. It's a barrier to actually completing tasks, and it's a barrier to basically making sure that the website does the job it needs to do in terms of helping the university deliver against its strategic vision. So we have content types. And this is one of the content types. This is a guide. And the way that the whole content publisher is built, it's built around the idea of user needs. So Becky's here from the Faculty of Engineering Design. Hello, Becky. So there was a great post that Beth, who works alongside Becky, wrote a little while back about how much he hated the content publisher, but how much she loved the content publisher, because every time she had to create a bit of content, she had to answer one fundamental question. What was the user need? Why did that content need to exist? And what she said in the conclusion of that post is it forced her to think about basically what the need was. Why would somebody want to read that content? What was the reason why somebody would want to come to Bath and read that content? So I think that's a really important aspect of the tool we have. So basically it's a structured editor. And each of these boxes helps us to build a web page. Show you a publish one. This is actually a collection. It's a very similar format. We have it's a subject, we call it label, but it's a subject. You can select the lead item, there's a summary, and then it's broken down into blocks again. So the reason why we've done this, you might think, well, it looks quite Spartan, but people who use our website and who use our content publisher, we don't want them to have to constantly remember how to do things. So a lot of our publishers don't spend very long in the publisher. So they might be there 1 hour every month. The problem with OpenCMS was they were confronted by a jumbo jet kind of landing display system in order to actually use it, and they just forgot. So a lot of their time was spent us supporting them to not even create content, just to help them do it. So it's about stripping it back and thinking about our users. So, publisher features, simple intuitive content editor, easy to use templates to guide content creation. We have guides as well that help set standards. And the reason why we have standards is because in future we need to have some predictability about what will happen when somebody basically publishes a page, but it's not really a page anymore. They're creating a content item that can be reused elsewhere. We also have a subject and department landing page curator. We have automatic content item creation by department and subject. So, using Funnelback's technology, we basically generate automatically, on the fly, lists of content. They act as our form of navigation. One of the other things for us was we had so many lists of different things that were constantly broken. We wanted to take away a lot of the heavy lifting that was involved in maintaining the website, because we only have a finite amount of resource, so we want to focus it in the right place. And we also have automatic republish of related content items on change. So if you change a content item in the CMS, it'll automatically republish the other related items that are kind of associated to it. So for a good example, if we pin an item to a landing page and we change the title or summary or the image, it automatically does that republishing to the landing page. So you don't even have to think about republishing that page, it just does it. And that's really important because as you add complexity, it becomes more difficult to use the system, and also errors begin to creep in. So it's all about trying to help the content creators maintain a good website. So technical details, and Tom, my development manager, is here. Basically, it's a microservices architecture. So it's not one kind of monolithic application. It's actually a series of applications that work together. There's a separation of content from presentation, and also basically it's static publishing. We currently use dynamic database for OpenCMS, which creates all sorts of issues with basically keeping the website up, making sure that they're basically the two sites are mirrored correctly. So we've gone to a static website. That's really important for us. It means it's more resilient, and also it's just easier to maintain. And if everything fell over, we lost everything, we could still edit manually the HTML on the website. Hopefully that should never happen. Just to explain how the publisher works. So we have the structured content editor. We have the publisher, which is actually a piece of technology called Hugo. Tom reliably informs me, how many seconds does it take to republish our current website? 7 seconds. How many pages? 1,700. So we can republish the whole website. So we can publish a change to the website if we want to change the header, footer, whatever, in 7 seconds at the moment, which is great. And then we have basically where we want those outputs to be. So right now we're focusing on the web page, basically web pages, but if you notice, potentially in future apps. We've also been working, we have a separate application which is built in a very similar way, which is basically our course publisher. And that is actually about creating a single source of truth, which is similar to Cardiff. And we're kind of in a similar place. We're now in a position potentially to basically output to a print prospectus. So whole swathes of duplicating effort have been removed, freeing time for people to spend time on content and actually do other important roles. And I think if anybody's a content creator or a marketer, everybody understands how pressured they are in their roles, and that's really key for us to make it as easy as possible to do stuff. So the biggest challenge has been making sure that feature development keeps pace with transition. So we work in an agile way. We learn our way forward. So we haven't developed all the features in the publisher. We've only developed them when we need them. So that's been difficult recently, obviously, with a lot of changes to the team. So a good example of that has been scheduled publishing. Currently, our new developer, Chris, is working on scheduled publishing, and it's actually currently a blocker to kind of getting the press team on board and moving them off our aging WordPress news site. So effectively, we have a need as a press officer, I need to prevent a piece of content being published before this date so it doesn't break press embargo. So that's a news story they're currently working on. And once that's done, we'll be able to onboard them. So occasionally we've gone out of sync, and it's not been an easy transition when that happens, but we're working our way through it. So I actually became head of digital at the end of January. And one of the things that I've kind of been working on, so I'm kind of opening up to some of the thinking I'm doing at the moment, is about how do we better communicate what the publisher is and will become. And a lot of our users, whether that be faculty web editors, marketing managers, or senior people in the university, want to know when they're going to get something. And it's really difficult to describe. Because, as I said, we've learned our way forward. As we've transitioned, we've built features. And that can create problems for us. So what I've been doing is thinking about how do we create a clear vision and strategy for this tool. It's funny, you suddenly become an owner of a product that in previous, we weren't necessarily owner of a product with OpenCMS. It was just there. We occasionally developed features, but we weren't necessarily continually developing it as the feature set was complete. So it's created its own learning for us. So our users, and I've deliberately put this on the slide, because I actually think what gets forgotten sometimes is the users of our publishing platform are not only the people who visit our website, and obviously there's far more than that, but also actually the publishers. They're our users too, and I think that really gets forgotten in some of the equations. We build often very, very complicated products and actually forget that the people using them, and we can bring them to a level of IT literacy, still they're not going to be regularly using the system. We want to take those barriers away. We want to make it as easy as possible. So I'm not going to tell you what the product vision is, but basically it's our overarching goal. The reason why we're doing it, it provides a continued purpose in an ever-changing world and acts as the product's true north. And that's basically what we're working on. What is our fundamental vision for the publisher? And I've kind of described it kind of in more detail, but we need to kind of have a really clear vision of where we want to be, not only for us, but for the other people we're working with. So, draft product strategy. So we have a number of content strategies. We have a research content strategy, we have a student recruitment content strategy, and they all share some similarities about the goals we want to achieve with our content. We also have some goals we have for the content publisher. And it seems funny to me that we have lots of different goals, but actually we're trying to achieve roughly the same thing. So I'm going to focus on actually just the one in orange, which is the use one. But basically, so these are drafts, we're still working on them. And they will change, but it's just a starting point. So basically, we want to make the editor as simple and intuitive for authors to plan, create, organize reusable, reusable, and relatable content. And that's the kind of case we want to. Just want to touch on reach. Reach is really important because we need to reach new audiences, we need to engage with those. And the platform is built around that principle. So if you think about back to what I said about the fact that we're building a platform, not a web page, that's fundamental. We need to be able to publish out to wherever our users are. Because if we're not, people don't naturally think, oh, bath.ac.uk, or I want to go to the University of Bath. We may need to engage them in other spaces. One of the kind of, try and put this in one of the kind of very, very early implementations of that is the fact that actually we don't manage images, we don't manage video inside the publisher, and that was a deliberate choice. Both out of necessity, because we didn't want to build a video management system or image management system, but it was also, there was actually another thinking behind that, is that actually we need to be on those other channels, and it becomes a natural part of publishing to those channels. We add the data around the title, the description, then we begin to reach audiences who don't necessarily think about Bath. It doesn't all become trapped in the website. Our users don't all engage just on our website, they engage in other spaces as well. So it makes it easier to do those things. So, thinking about success, how do we begin to measure success in a product like this? Well, I think, thinking about it, it's something along the lines of how long does it take to publish a thing? Can we make it easier to publish a thing? Does digital see us fall in support requests to use the system? These are all important things alongside a number of content compliance failures. So, are people making less mistakes in the website? Because if the tool is doing its job, those are the things that should change. And by keeping our eye on those kind of metrics, we begin to know whether we're being successful or not. So we're still thinking about how to do this. And like I said, it's very early thinking around how we develop this vision and strategy. So guiding principles, anybody recognise those ones? So we have some digital principles. They've been refined very slightly. We've added a new one, advocate standards and structure. And that doesn't just mean standards and structure in terms of whether we use schema or not. It also means about how we work with other people. Agile requires a common language and a common way of working. If you don't have that, then it's like you're talking two different languages and you're working at cross purposes. We need to advocate how good it is to work in a similar way, because it helps us deliver things more quickly. It helps, basically, it creates shortcuts. Kind of just wrapping up. So for a long while, we were developing kind of like we were goal-driven. We do a lot of goals. We're going to deliver the student recruitment website. And then with it, we weren't really expressing the features that needed to be developed. So we're thinking about how do we change our roadmap. We currently maintain a roadmap back now, hopefully it's once a month, but we want to change the roadmap to actually talk about features. And this is what I say about communicating what's changing in the content publisher. So somebody can look at our roadmap and say, actually, I don't exactly know the date of when something will be delivered, but I do know in a broad set of principles, this is the next thing to be developed. This is an example, it's not final, I'm going to show you that. But basically, it's about helping us to communicate with stakeholders. The roadmap has never really been about us developing something for ourselves. It's a tool to help us communicate and engage with other people in a way that is simple and straightforward. And the feedback has always been, it's a good tool because I can understand when something basically roughly due to happen within a quarter or within a month or so. And we've been experimenting with it. So Tom and I began to kind of experiment about how we group features together in a more meaningful way. So for us, having a clear product vision and strategy allows us to identify and prioritize groups and group stories in our backlog more effectively. But that's really key, because actually, the way we were working before, the team was kind of just developing, fixing bugs, developing small features, and we couldn't communicate effectively about all the good work that the team was doing. So it felt felt like a duck. You're kind of moving seamlessly and furiously kicking, but nobody could actually see anything happening. And we need a way to basically be able to communicate better. So we can actually say, in our blog posts, in our email communications, and our engagement with stakeholders, this is what's happened, this is what's good, and this is what will happen next. Because it's all about bringing people with you. And that's always a challenge in a large organisation like Bath. So, kind of bring it to close. Ross came to IWMW, Ross Ferguson, in 2012, and he said he wanted to bring the kind of startup techniques to a university. Well, we still have that kind of genetics, but I think we've moved on as a team. We've changed into something else. Like every startup, it eventually has to become a product company. It has to build products that people use and want to use. It doesn't necessarily mean it changes our values, but it does change the way we have to think about the world. And one of those biggest changes was a startup isn't necessarily always accountable for what it's building. I'm accountable, if I kind of play that model through, I'm accountable to shareholders. They're the stakeholders I work with, and I need to provide basically their indication of return on investment. But it also means just us refining how we think about things. And we've always put our users at the centre of everything, but I think it is about making a recommitment as a team to basically putting our users first, whether they're the content specialists or they are students. It's about meeting with real users more often, because I think we could have avoided some of the problems that we experienced throughout basically developing the publisher if we just spent a little bit more time with our users. Testing high-risk hypotheses. We now have a product we develop, and that requires us to think differently about it. We can't just make snap judgments. So, yeah, let's just build this feature without testing it, because we're going to waste time. We can't afford to waste time. We need to make good decisions. So that doesn't mean we're going to spend weeks of basically doing user research, but it might mean spending a couple of days building basically a mock-up, testing with users, knowing it's the right thing to do, and then basically doing it, eventually basically developing it. It means do less research more often, which I think, and I'll show you just the thing we've just been working on, is really important. I think the one thing we learned from the course publisher, see, I'm even getting confused, was the fact that just taking it out and asking a few simple questions during as part of guerrilla user research, helped us make better choices about the tool we were building and the actual end product we shipped. And transparent. And that always feels weird to put it there, but I think we need to be transparent. We need to be open about what we're doing. And we need to say when we make mistakes, but we also need to celebrate our successes as well. So this kind of final slide. I had, it was a privilege. I had an opportunity to listen to Mike Atherton speak a couple of weeks ago from Facebook, and this quote came up at the end of his presentation, and it really kind of spoke to me, because people need narratives. People need to feel that they're heading in a direction, they're going to achieve something. And I think in the past we've got very much focused on, like, go and build, go and get nails, go and get wood. And we've not given them the vision, not something that they can buy into and believe will happen. And my job is to begin to create and craft that vision, so we can basically continue to develop the publisher, which for me is a privilege, because it's the tool that it's from the nerdy side of me, it's the tool that I dream of, the tool that allows people to create content once and publish it everywhere. And it is a unique tool for, at least for us, and I've only encountered a few other people who are kind of thinking in this way. So I think if we're going to tackle the challenges of content, then we do radically need to think differently about how we build content management systems.
Thank you.